Hi everybody and welcome to the NCASS webinar. I'm Dan Fox, I'm the Commercial Director here at NCASS. I'm joined with me today by Andrew James from a catering accounting company. Hi Andrew.
Hi Dan, how are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Pardon?
Good to be back.
Yeah, good to be back. Yeah, 3 weeks away. Have you missed it being on these webinars, Andrew?
Yeah, it's good.
So today's webinar, we're looking again at finances. This is a third webinar that we've done in this series of webinars to help members through the coronavirus crisis. If you haven't watched the first two on financial measures yet, then please do go and watch those. So we did the first one around about 4 weeks ago, which was looking at all the different types of measures that were available then. We did another one a week later, that looking at more specifically at the measures that are particularly applicable to members. And this one we're doing now as an update as to the things that have happened since then. So hopefully you'll find this really useful. We've got lots of practical hints and tips for you to be able to use. We're going to be taking questions throughout this webinar. So if you've got any questions, then please do post them into the chat box, or either on Facebook or on YouTube. If you're watching this afterwards on YouTube, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel to get notified of other videos that are coming through. Also, if you've got any hints or tips in terms of any successes that you've had in terms of applying or receiving any financial measures, then please do post them in the chat box as well. We'd love to share these out to members and to other small businesses that are out there as well, because you know, the reality is we're all finding this difficult, aren't we? So anything that you found that works, brilliant. Please put them in the box and share them with them. So Andrew, briefly summarizing, what are we going to be thinking about today?
Well, I think we're going to kick off, Dan, by looking at the loan situation. If you remember, there were two types of loans that the government had put out there. There was the business interruption loan, and we can reflect on how effective that's been. And then there was the bounce back loan, which came in a bit later, which is easier to access for people. And again, we can share a few ideas and success stories indeed on the bounce back loan of members of your organisation who've actually managed to tap into some of these resources.
Yep.
And so that's where we're going to kick off. Yeah.
We're going to cover a bit about the furlough scheme as well, because that's changed a bit as well, hasn't it? And then the income support scheme, and some grants as well. There's been some changes in grants.
Yeah, we're going to tick off the job retention scheme. It's been extended in the last few days of last week. The government announced an extension to that. So we're going to explain what that means for members. And also then we're going to look at the very important area for members of NCASS, which is basically the self-employed income support scheme, where there's been a few teething problems. I don't know whether members have experienced this. So if you have experienced teething problems with that, please put it in the chat box and share it with us, because I know there have been some issues with that. And then, yeah, finally, Dan, the government came out last week and mentioned that they were going to put in place discretionary grants. And this is aimed at people who haven't been able to tap into the other forms of finance. There's limited information out there at the moment about that, but we're going to cover that off too.
You're right, but that is a real winner, could potentially be a real winner for members, couldn't it, Andrew, in terms of people who haven't been applicable for any other kind of grants. This is something that which really could benefit a lot of members, so we'll be covering that. So yeah, great. So let's jump straight in then. So thinking about the loans then, so just to remind everybody, we're not going to be covering things in infinite detail, so this is a recap of what's happened. You can go back and watch the videos if you wanted more detail on the specifics. But there's two types of loans, aren't there, Andrew? The coronavirus business interruption loans, also known as the CBILS loan scheme, and the bounce back loan scheme.
Yeah, well, the big one, the business interruption loan scheme, was one of the first areas of support the government put in place. The problem with this has been in the time it's taken to access it. I mean, potentially you can access up to $250,000, but the banks are pretty well going through their normal process that they would go through to approve a loan. So that means you've got to send in financial information, forecasts and stuff like that.
Presumably that's because they're, sorry to interrupt, Andrew, presumably it's taken so long because they're still exposed to 20% of the risk of that, aren't they? So they want to make sure that that's working.
The government are only backing 80% on those loans, but they are bigger, so you can access more money. But just to give members a bit of a time scale, we got a £200,000 finance through for a company last week, and yesterday for somebody in the pub sector, we got one through for 150,000. Now, both of those applications were started at the beginning of lockdown, so you can see, members, the time it's taken to get them across the line.
And so let's talk about that a little bit more. So, what kind of information did they require? What was the sticking point for them? What was?
They needed up-to-date financial information for a start. So they needed the latest set of accounts. They needed management figures. So if they got any trading results since their last set of accounts up to the present date, they needed that. They wanted personal financial information about the directors and the shareholders. And they also finally wanted any other details of any other loans or finance that the company and the individual directors had got. So putting that package together and then getting hold of somebody who would look at it, that's the hard thing.
Yeah.
We put the package together, but then getting a bank to actually deal with it was the hard thing.
And what kind? It sounds like a heck of a lot of information they require. What kind of size company were they that were submitting for this loan?
Okay, well, they both got turnovers about £1 million, the two that I'm talking about.
Hospitality businesses, were they?
One was hospitality, one was photographic.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But that's good news that you were seeing some hospitality businesses get it, even though there's been a real hold up for them. It seems like the message coming through is that it's hard to get, but once you get it, then it is worth it.
It is. You need to persevere. You need to keep badgering the bank, which, as I mentioned before, Mark in my office has been dealing with this stuff, and he's been onto the bank on a daily basis, really trying to nudge them along. The problem is, Dan, that many banks nowadays don't have a designated bank manager for that client or for that business. And if you haven't got a dedicated bank manager and you go through to call centres, it's hard work trying to get hold of somebody to move it forward.
Yeah. Okay, so coronavirus business interruption loan scheme, great to have if you can get it, hard to get, but it's a bigger volume. So up to 250 grand unguaranteed though, isn't it? You can get more than that, can't you? Because it's up to 50 million if you need it. But obviously for 99.9% of members, that's not anywhere near applicable.
No, I wouldn't say so. But what has been applicable, Dan, has been the bounce back loans.
Yeah.
So these came in about, 2 weeks after the original finance announced by the government. And the reason why they introduced this was because the time it was taking to get hands on the business interruption loans.
Yeah.
They did a success. I can say, hand on heart, for your members and for my clients, some of which are related, as you know, it has been a huge success. So recently, in fact, last week, we managed to get a bounce back loan of 50,000 for a member based in Penrith. And also we made an application yesterday for one of your members based in South Shields. And we're very hopeful that one will come through. So these are happening.
And was that for the full 50,000?
The one was for the full 50,000 and the other was for 22,000, if I remember rightly. And it's based on, you can only apply for 25% of your turnover in 2019. So you're limited if your trading operation isn't as big, you can only claim a reduced amount.
Yeah. I mean, there's some figures that came out just the other day that 270,000 bounce back loans have been approved, something to the value of like £8 billion already, which is, I mean, the sums that we're talking about when we talk about all the measures are just enormous, aren't they? Just insane.
And we're the one thing that worries me, Dan, is that sooner or later we're all going to have to pay for this. So that's going to be tax rises, it's going to be rate increases or whatever. But when we're all out of this, please bear in mind that we're going to pay for it. The other thing that I also would urge your members to be careful about is not that they would, but don't make a false claim. Because one thing that is going to happen is HMRC, when we're all out of this, are going to be looking at some of the claims and potentially, therefore, claiming all the money back.
I mean, you had some great advice in the last webinar, Andrew, I thought, which was basically you were saying, even if you don't need it now, to apply for it. It was.
And I'll tell you what, maybe on a live webinar, this probably isn't appropriate, but I'm going to say it anyway. So, because I'm there for your members. What some people have done is apply for the bounce back loan, varying amounts, 30, 40,000, don't need the money right now because it's interest free for the first 12 months. They put it on deposit.
Yeah.
And there are banks, I think the TSB were offering 1% interest. If you put it in a 1-year term loan, they were offering 1.5%. Not great rates of money, but better than the kick out the backside, to be honest.
What's that? 750 quid at 1.5%?
Yeah, 750 quid for your 50,000 loan for a year. Yeah.
Obviously, that's on the business loan though. But actually, would you have to pay any taxes on that, Andrew?
You would have to pay tax on the interest you receive as well.
Yeah.
With all the thing in the tail.
Give me one hand and you take away with the other, eh?
But it is a tactic that if I would get the loan if I was advising a member now, and he's worried about how long this virus is going to last, how long shutdown is going to last. He might have money at the moment. I would say put your loan in place, put it on deposit or in your bank account, and then because you never know at the back end of it when we're coming out of it, you might need that money, and you might need it for other things that you don't realise. Improve your marketing. Getting new kit in place for the upsurge in activity, things like that.
For a lot of members, it's paying pitch fees, putting deposits down for pitch fees, because you never know what might happen, do you? And one of the things for certain is that when this is over, I'm 100% guaranteed, like convinced of this. When this is over, the market is going to explode for caterers. And what I mean caterers, I mean lots and lots of caterers. A lot of our members are obviously mobile and event caterers. What we know is all this year's events have been cancelled, all of them. But next year, the plan will be to do all those events plus a lot of the ones which were due to take place this year. So just think, obviously we've got the Olympics. Obviously they're not got the Olympics here in the UK, but the principle applies that the same events, the Euro 2020 was going to take place this year, and it's going to take place in 2021. And so each weekend there's going to be a heck of a lot of events going to be taking place. And so it means that there's not going to be any shortage of events next year. But of course, the same market forces will still apply, that you'll need to try and secure that work.
So if you need to pay up front for pitch fees and stuff like that, as you just mentioned, Dan, the bounce back loan would be perfect fit to me. Just a couple of other points with it. I mean, the banks have been very different in the speed in which they've turned it around. We've had some turn around the same day as application. And last week we did one with HSBC where we applied on the Monday and the money came through the following Monday. So just giving members an idea of the timescales on that.
So but 1 to 5 days in terms of
way better than the business interruption rate. The other thing I just want to mention is that the amount you can borrow is based on your turnover in 2019. There's a lot of, misunderstanding about like what does that figure represent? Where do you get it from? How do you identify it? And it's not clear, I'll be honest. Is it from your accounts? Is it on the calendar year? How do you work out that figure? I don't think, to be honest, the banks are too fussed. But what I do recommend members do is keep a log, a record of how they calculated it. So whether they use the financial year, whether they use their accounts, whatever, keep a log of where your turnover figure came from.
Great tip. We've had a question come through from Nick from Crocus Paella. Nick's wants to know, if you applied for the loan and things didn't work out as planned, and I was not in a position to pay the loan after year one, what happens then?
Well, as I understand it, Dan, the banks will obviously pursue it. They're not going to write it off and claim off the government to get their money back that way straight away. So they will ask you and try and arrange with you a repayment plan. But what they will not do is put a charge or make you sell any private property or vehicles or anything like that to recover the loan. So if they cannot recover it any other way, ultimately they will go to the government. But I don't think for 1 minute they'll just say, okay, sorry, you can't pay, never mind. They will ask you to put together a kind of business plan of how you intend to repay it.
I mean, there's a difference here, though, isn't there, Andrew, between if you're a sole trader / partnership, as in self-employed, or if you're an LTD, though, isn't there? There's a different legal position depending on where you are, doesn't it? So,
I mean, the limited company, Dan, is fairly safe position because the private assets of the shareholders are protected under limited liability. But similarly, with the bounce back loans, if you're a sole trader, they cannot come after your house and they cannot come after your assets or vehicles and other major assets that you might have. So therefore, you've got some of the degree of protection that a limited company has if you've taken out a bounce back loan.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to members, especially all your sole traders. Yeah.
Ian Stone has just texted in, Andrew, with a little hint. He said that it's calculated on your turnover figure as shown on your tax return.
Well, Ian, thank you very much for that.
What do you say?
That would be for a sole trader, because on your tax return, you obviously have to disclose the turnover and all the costs and the overheads of the business on your tax return. In the case of a limited company, I would either go for the figure on your accounts if you got a year ending in 2019, and they also say that you can use a reliable estimate if you haven't got your accounting information up to date. So going back to the point I made earlier, I don't think I think they've been deliberately vague.
Yeah.
And therefore, so long as you make the repayments and treat the loan with respect, in other words, make your payments, pay your interest, stuff like that, when interest kicks in, I don't think they're going to be too hard on you when they're looking at your turnover levels.
Yeah, I've had another really good question from Nick, though. He's asked from Crocus Paler, he's asked, does it matter what I spend it on? Is there any kind of checks that are made? So, like, can I choose what I spend it on?
Good question. Was it Nick? I can't remember. Nick?
Yeah, that's from Nick. I mean, the follow-up question is that he's like, say I've got credit card debts, can I use to pay off my credit card debts and consolidate my loans? Because in essence, what this is a really good, like the cheapest loan you're ever going to get, isn't it?
2.5%. Yeah. Let me answer the question this way, Dan, because I've filled a few of these in for members. When you fill the application form in, it actually says, and you're signing this off, that you will only use this loan for business purposes. So that's in the terms of the condition on which the loan is advanced to you. So, in my opinion, if you don't follow that guideline, you're close to committing a fraud.
Yeah.
Wouldn't advise it. Yeah. That's what the rules say.
But there's a difference, though, isn't there, between, again, self-employed and LTD, isn't there? So if it's an LTD, then it's legally owed to by the company, isn't it? But if it's a sole trader, then it's legally your money, isn't it? And so you could argue that that in the interest of the business, as in me, I need to pay off my debts in order to stay solvent. Thank you. Soluble. In order to make sure I don't melt.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think you could probably get away with it so long as you don't default. They will only look at, I think, because of the limited resources of HMRC and the government, that there will only be, I mean, don't quote me on this, members, but what my guidance would be is if you pay your loans, you're very unlikely to get inspected or to get hauled over the coals on these issues. But it does say in the loan application only for business purposes. It doesn't, Dan, go into the definition of business purposes. But if you're using it to pay off personal credit cards that you've built up on holidays and stuff like that, I would argue that that's probably not for business purposes.
But there is a difference. It's a grey line, isn't it, Andrew?
It is grey. Until cases come to fruition or court or whatever, we're not going to know how they're going to treat it.
The reality is, it sounds like there's not a problem unless you default.
I think so. Yeah. The banks aren't interested. If they get their money back, they're happy.
We spent a lot of time on loans, but so we're going to move on. But finally, if I want to find out any more information on the loan scheme or apply for it, what do I do, Andrew?
Well, you go on the website, first of all, of the bank who you are with. That's the easiest way because they've got all the records about you and all the money laundering documentation in place. That would be my advice. If you're struggling, you can always give us a call at Catering Accounting Company. We've managed to secure, as I mentioned, bounce back loans for members of yours, Dan. So we'll happily assist anybody who needs some help.
Yeah, great. So, job retention scheme, also known as the furloughing. It's kicked off big now, hasn't it? We've got 7.5 million workers on it. The news was this week, £14 billion a month is up and running. It seems pretty simple. It seems to be working for people.
Money's coming in, yeah. People who our wages department have furloughed on behalf of clients, they've seen their payouts coming in. There are some changes. Yeah. The scheme was going to run up to the 31st of July. That's been extended last week. Sorry.
I think it was originally going to be till June, wasn't it? And they've extended it to
June, but there's no changes to the scheme up to the 31st of July.
Right.
Then after the 31st of July, from the 1st of August, the scheme is being extended through to the 31st of October, but they are making some changes over the August to October period. I think they're going to, the information hasn't been released yet, but I think they're going to expect the employer to pay some of the cost of the employee's wages who has been furloughed.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big concern for a lot of hospitality businesses. Obviously, many of them are hoping to be back trading and doing something at some point before then. But what if they're not going to be able to, but they've still got staff costs? What's going to happen there, Andrew?
Well, unfortunately, the big R word's going to have to be considered redundancy, isn't it? Because if they still can't afford to pay and keep those guys and gals on their books as employees, they have no option. They have no option. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Let's hope that some people are back to work, and there are some events taking place in the back end of the summer.
But it seems like the noise is that they're going to try to wind this scheme down because it's so expensive, isn't it?
Indeed.
So by end of October, is there going to be a scheme in place? Which is again more reason why we need to get these loans in place or something to get the cash into the business to stay solvent.
Indeed, absolutely right.
So furlough. Any other things on furlough?
There's been a couple of cases where the revenue they're not clients of ours, but the revenue have held up the payments of a furlough arrangement because they're looking into it. Very few cases. I've just heard of two, to be honest, because we're part of a network of accountants and we all share information. So basically, I think it's run pretty smoothly, considering it's all been put in place so quickly, and people have had their payouts. Good.
Self-employed income support scheme.
Wow. Oh, damn. Tough. This one. Okay, so what the revenue were going to do was going to write out to self-employed people, and they were going to tell them of their eligibility under the scheme, and they were probably going to notify them as to the amount they felt that they were entitled to claim. And we've seen cases where genuinely self-employed people did not receive those letters at all. So we've advised all of our self-employed clients to get out there and make your claim, whether or not you've received a letter. Secondly, we've had cases ourselves of the revenue coming up with the wrong amount. So in other words, on one of your catering members' cases, the revenue have come in with a lower amount than we believe that client is entitled to. So you have the option under the scheme to press the review button. And obviously we've done that for that client. That means revenue have to go back, look at the numbers and recalculate to make sure they either come back with a different figure or the same one if they believe they're going to be correct. What do you have to do? Or what are the other things that have come out since we last met about the self-employed scheme? One thing is that you can still trade. You could even start a new trade. So if you're in catering at the moment, you got some skills as a plumber, you could do that. Or you could take on an employment and still claim under the scheme, obviously in your catering business. You've got to show that you've been adversely affected by COVID. So either you've got supply chain interruptions, which I wouldn't have thought would be the case of NCASS members, but you certainly qualify for the next one, fewer or no customers, because presumably you've got no events taking place, and equally staff unable to come to work. One thing where some of our self-employed people have not been quite so sharp on is that you have to make the claims through the government portal, or the government gateway portal, and some of them weren't registered. So if you go into the eligibility portal, you can there request gateway ID and password, and then process your claim. You need UTR number, NI number, government gateway details, and your bank details, and hopefully your claim will go through.
Just a little bit there. UTR, unique tax reference number, and NI is national insurance number.
Your government gateway ID and password, and your bank details.
Yeah.
You have to put those in for them to pay that.
And the big one for this, Andrew, is that obviously they initially announced it for 3 months. That was the same as the furlough scheme. It was there to match the furlough scheme. this hasn't been extended. Do we got any indications as to whether this is going to be extended or not?
There's been no announcements, Dan, unfortunately, on that whatsoever. I suggest that all the lobbying groups, including NCASS, if they can, badger your MP, badger the government to try and extend this scheme, because I think it's very unlikely that by the end of May we're all going to be back to work, because it's only 2 weeks away. So it's absolutely not going to happen. So I think we need to pray that the government will extend it.
Yeah. But people are receiving payouts on it now, are they? They've started receiving it.
Started coming through, Dan, to be honest. Literally, we've had 2 or 3 clients in the last week receive their payout. Yeah.
So I had a message in from Robert on social media. He's saying, I've been paid the 80% of income for last year's books, but have been doing deliveries and making money. Will we need to pay the 80% back?
Can you explain that question a little bit to me again, Robert?
Yeah, so I'm guessing that he's applied under the self-employed income support scheme, being paid out on that, but then as being making money on top of this. So he's been doing deliveries and probably span his business model around.
He won't have to repay that. Sorry, I understand the question now. All you've got to demonstrate, Robert, is that your business has been adversely affected. So clearly, if your sales were, I don't know, let's say £10,000 a month, and over the virus period, because you've been doing deliveries, they're £12,000 a month, then yes, you'd have to repay it. But assuming that your sales and you've been adversely affected by COVID, you will not have to repay it.
So if my business, and there are some businesses, if my business has actually sales have gone up, I can't claim for it. But if my business has gone down, then I can claim for it.
Correct.
Do we know what kind of percentage that adversely affected represents? Is that, is it 10%, 20%, 50%?
There's no guideline like that. You just have to show that you have been adversely affected. And as I said, it could be in any of those 3 areas that I've just mentioned. Supply chain interrupted, so you can't get hold of the products that you need to sell. That you've got fewer or less customers, or indeed no customers, or your staff cannot come to work. They all qualify as adversely affected. Yeah.
Self-employed income support scheme. Anything else? Any top tips, Andrew, before we move on?
Yeah, well, very quickly on this one, there've been 1 or 2 problems when the eligibility portal says that people are eligible when they're not. So I'll give you a couple of examples of that. So it does not take account of people who ceased trading in 1920 tax year. So it will still show them as being eligible, but they stopped trading. Taxpayers who might have decided not to trade in 2021, they're still showing up as eligible, but they've now got a new job or something like that. They're no longer self-employed. Doesn't take account of that. Doesn't take account the eligibility checklist as to whether or not they have been adversely affected. Doesn't ask you to put in any numbers to show your trade has diminished. And it doesn't take any account of businesses that might have incorporated, because some people have turned from a sole trader into a limited company. Doesn't take account of any of those. So sometimes what you're seeing on the eligibility portal is not accurate. One other thing I just want to mention is that if you've got an accountant, he cannot make the claim for you. This is one area where we really are struggling to support members and clients.
Why is that, Andrew?
I don't know. I think they reckon that there could be some fraud involved if you're allowing third parties to make the claim on your behalf. But you have to do it yourself. We can talk you through it, or if you share a screen with us, and we can help you fill in the bits if you're struggling with it. But actually, we can't do it off our own computers.
Great.
That's just a bit of tip there.
Right, moving on to small business grants then. So grants that are available. So we talked at length historically in the previous webinars about the hospitality and leisure grant and the small business grant. So do you know what, Andrew? I'm amazed how many people, how many members, how many small businesses just don't know about the financial measures that are available to them. So many of the people are eligible for grants, but aren't even doing anything about it. It's just outstanding.
So what we've had to do is literally go through our client bank using what we call as a WOO chart, windows of opportunity, and identify the ones where we think it's, there's a potential claim to be made there, and told them about it. Because as you rightly say, give you a little example, not in catering, but it was It's a kitchen and bathroom distributor in the East Midlands.
Yeah.
They got 4 properties. All of them they were paying rates off. All because they were in retail. They could claim on all of them. So we've claimed for them a huge amount of money, and they weren't aware of it.
So the key concept here is if you pay business rates, and that's the key thing in England and Scotland and Northern Ireland, isn't it? Slightly different in Wales. If you pay business rates, and you're a leisure and hospitality business, and you know that according to the planning permission that's on your business rates document, but it's a business rates up to a maximum of 51,000. If the rateable value is under 51,000, of your property, you are eligible for a leisure and hospitality grant of up to £25,000.
Correct.
Simple as that, isn't it?
Simple as that. Yeah. Some
members are operating out of commercial premises that are not approved for takeaways or cafes, but they might be able to still be eligible for a grant under the small business grant, isn't it? Under the small business, what's the technical term, Andrew? The small business rates relief. So it's the small business grants fund.
So this is
where 10,000.
Where if you're in retail, if you're in any other sector as well, if your rateable value is under 15,000, then you can make a £10,000 grant claim under that scheme. You can't claim under both.
Right.
So that's important.
And if I want to get one of them, I go to my local authority. Should they be coming to me? I mean, obviously this has been slow off the ground to begin with, isn't it? But more and more members are getting it come through now, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't wait for local authorities, to be honest, on our client base, so we got stuck into it. And I would advise any of your members, if you think you might be eligible, look on the website for your local authority in your area, and you will find information on there. Make your claim. Which
department is it that's within local authorities that are dealing with it, Andrew?
Well, I imagine it would be the rating division, business rating division. Yeah. But on, say, Birmingham City Council, for instance, it is quite clear where you have to make the claim. It's splashed over their website.
Yeah. So, if you haven't heard of anything and you think you might be eligible, get onto that. The key part, though, is that you have to be the business rates payer. Isn't that right, Andrew?
It only will pay out to the rates payer. Yeah.
And so the issue that a lot of members find is that they will rent a space within a building, and the landlord or the main tenant will be the business rates payer. So a lot of members have come back and say, well, am I eligible because I'm paying this rent? The key question is, are you the rates payer? And it's amazing how many of them aren't.
I've come across so many where they're not actually the rates payer themselves. People on industrial estates, people sharing premises, stuff like that. Industrial parks, science parks, for instance. People in those kind of situations don't pay rates and therefore have missed out.
But that's where the big news has just come out about this announcement recently about a new discretionary grant, which is aimed directly at those kind of people. Do you want to tell us more about this discretionary grant, Andrew?
So it was announced last week, Dan, and the discretionary grant is aimed at businesses, as you rightly say, who've missed out on the small business grant fund or the retail, leisure and hospitality funds. The amounts that you can claim under these discretionary funds are 25,000, 10,000, or any amount less than 10,000. They are discretionary, though, so they are at the whim, if you like, of your local council. The government have told the local councils to focus on businesses which have got a high degree of fixed cost. So fixed property costs such as rent or mortgage payments would be eligible for support under the scheme. Again, obviously the business has to be adversely affected by COVID, and that your rent and your mortgage payments must be less than £51,000 a year. So they're using the same sort of yardstick there as they used on the leisure, retail, hospitality grant.
So they're aiming it specifically at those kind of people that miss out on it because they don't pay the rates themselves, isn't it? It's aimed exactly at those kind of people.
So when I did my research on this, Dan, because it's really new, this is, and actually, members, there's still information to come out about this sort of further detail. But the councils have been asked to prioritise businesses who are using shared office space, flexible workspace, including units. So if you're making your food in a unit but don't pay rates and you potentially would qualify. Regular market traders who have fixed cost rents. So maybe some of your guys, I know they're not market traders as such, but they might have fixed sites for in areas in London, for instance, where they trade from and they sell their food from. That is a fixed rent cost that they may qualify under. B&Bs, I don't know whether you've got any members who are bed and breakfast operations, but they will come under it. And people that don't pay business rates, that's who it's aimed at.
Yep. And this is potentially huge, isn't it? Really, it's a lifeline for a lot of members. The key point here, though, isn't it, is that it's discretional. It's up to the council. Is there any kind of any guidance at all as to who they decide to pay this out to?
No. And I tell you what, Dan, I spent quite a considerable amount of time in the last 24, 48 hours going onto various councils' websites. I've been onto Milton Keynes. I've looked at Chester. I've obviously looked at Birmingham, where I'm based from. And the amount of information that's currently available on many of these websites is pitiful, to be honest. Yeah. Now, they do say the schemes aren't going to come into place till early June. But hey, we're only, looking at the calendar there on the wall, 10 days away, and there's very little information out there.
Yeah. I mean, the other big thing about it is there's a limited pot, isn't it? Unlike the other grant funds, it's a case of whoever applies. They've announced that this is £617 million, isn't it? Which is across the whole country. So it seems like there's a limited pot. Is at the discretion, and you need to apply for it via your local authority. If you were a member, if you were an independent caterer and you're going, I'm eligible. I've not been able to. I should be eligible because I'm really affected by it. And I've not been able to get any of the other grants previously. What advice would you give, Andrew, in order to get those to try to get that grant for you?
Okay, there's two things that I'd be doing, Dan. Is I'd be ringing my council. I'd be asking them, look, when are you going to release information? I think I'm eligible. Make sure I'm first on your list. And I'd be looking daily at their websites.
Yeah. Don't wait for them to contact you. You go out and need to be proactive about it. And would you take it's all about people as well, isn't it? People think that councils and government is anything different, but it's all about people. Find out the name of the person who's managing it, get to know them, befriend them, charm them, find out, believe the sob story, get on them. It's discretional. You need to find out who they are and sell yourself to them.
We obviously have to contact the revenue quite a bit as accountants, and because they're coming under so much fire at the moment with all this COVID stuff and the grants and all that kind of stuff, they're only giving out their first names. They won't give out their surnames. Really? And they've been getting abuse on Facebook and all sorts of social media. So that's the directives they've been given. Bear in mind, with these grants, you can't claim one of these grants if you've already benefited under the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme, if you benefited under the Small Business Grant, or under the Retail Hospitality and Leisure Grant.
Right. Say that again, Andrew, because I wasn't quite aware of that one before. Can you say that again?
You cannot go for one of these discretionary grants if you've already managed to tap into some of the other support. And the particular areas of support they mention is the self-employed income support, the small business grant, and the leisure, retail and hospitality grant.
So this is perfect for somebody potentially who started up in the last 12 months. Maybe they haven't submitted their tax return. They didn't have a tax return to submit for last year or accounts for 2019, but they've committed to a lease or a loan a lease on their premises. But maybe it was a premises that's not eligible for the hospitality grant. This is right on for them.
Right on for them. Get in fast.
Get in fast, get on it. Don't take no for an answer, because it's discretional.
It's the people who shout loudest will get the grant. I'm afraid it's one of the principles. I don't think there will be any other way in which councils can do it on a more, maybe a systematic basis or anything like that. I think it'll be the people that get in there early doors will be the ones that get the money.
Yeah, because when it's gone, it will be gone.
Yeah. So it's an opportunity, though, and I think for some of your members, and I've spoken to many of them after the last two webinars, a lot of them are saying, well, look, there's nothing out there for us. I don't pay rates. What can I do? I've only just started up, or, I've got no financial figures to show.
Yep.
I was saying, well, the only support you've potentially got is universal credits, which is true. But now here's perhaps another opportunity.
So I've had a message come in from somebody on social media. Said, I'm a food trader which is struggling with no work. The market I work for is being closed until further notice because of the COVID. I've directed my business and I was paying myself through dividends as my business wasn't generating a lot of money. Is there any help for me or my business? My business is closed and I'm not getting any funding. I don't have rentable premises, but I rent a space in the market which I pay £1,000 a month there. Sounds like
costs that would come under this grant scheme, surely.
Yep. Yep. Would he be, if he's kind of granting, if he's earning money through the furlough scheme, but only on a minimal amount, because he'd be paying himself tax efficiently, so paying himself a small income wage, and then usually through dividends. So he is getting some kind of furlough, but it's pennies. Yeah. Would he be eligible to claim through that potentially?
He would. That's good news for him, because one of the support areas that's sort of outside the disqualification is if you've claimed on the job retention scheme. So if you claimed on the job retention scheme, that will not bar you from tapping into the discretionary grants.
Right, so the job retention scheme doesn't affect that, right? That's good news. That's good
news for many people. I would also suggest that gentleman looks at bounce back loans, because there's potential there for him to, if he's traded in previous years and he's got a reasonable turnover level, he should be able to get a bounce back loan.
Yep. Message in from Monica. Can I apply for the bounce back loan and then later in June also apply for the grant with my council?
Yes.
Yeah, sounds eligible.
I was just trying to whir it in my brain and think,
the cogs work a bit slower nowadays, do they, Andrew?
Well, look at the grey hair, Only the grants that are disqualifying you. So as I mentioned, the self-employed income support grant, the small business grant fund, and the hospitality fund.
I think we're coming to the end. Andrew, have you got any other hints and tips? So I'll give you a second to think about that. Any other hints and tips to finish up on? If you found this useful, which we really hope you do, then please make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so you get notified of when these are coming up. It'd be amazing as well if you could share this out. So there's huge amounts of important information in here. We're desperate for as many businesses to be able to survive this crisis as possible, and I'm amazed every single time when I talk to people how many people don't know about these measures. Please spread the word, share this video, tell them what's going on. There's so many good things in here. I hope you agree that can help businesses survive. We're here to help members, so we provide lots of resources for independent catering businesses. Andrew's here as an amazing guy. A lot of people think I get quite a lot of messages from people asking about Andrew. He genuinely is as nice as a person as he comes across. He's like one of the salt of the earth kind of people. So he's brilliant, as you can tell by financial advice. So if you've got any questions that we haven't answered here, you can email them through to us here at NCASS. You can email them through to info@ncas.org.uk. Andrew will get back to you. He is available if you'd like to speak to him personally and privately as well. He shameless plug for him. He runs the catering accounting company, and they help independent catering companies to do their financial accountants, and we use them here at NCASS. They're great. Oh, I've been told that it's not info for the questions. The email address is opinion@ncas.org.uk. So, Andrew, finish up. Any last-minute hints and tips?
Well, the biggest tip is, to be honest, be proactive. I said that in the first session we did, Dan. So we've talked about loads of things today, like getting grant money, getting these discretionary grants, getting a bounce back loan. If you fight hard to get your money, you'll get it. I haven't seen anybody who hasn't been able to, this is genuine, I've not seen anybody that hasn't been able to tap into some sort of support at the moment. None of our clients or the people that come to us through these webinars. So get stuck into it. If you need help and support, go to NCASS. These guys will do everything they can to help and support you, because they're brilliant too. And I'm going to give you a plug, Dan, because one of the ladies that came on to me after the last webinar said that without your support at NCASS, she'd be out of business by now. She's based in South Shields. I won't say her name because it's not fair. But she said that you guys are amazing. So if you need any help and support, members, get in touch with NCASS. If it's an accounting related thing, they'll send it on to me, and I'll do my level best to support you and help you.
Yeah. I mean, we're just about trying to help independents. That, you know, this is an awful situation for so many businesses, isn't it? And us as an organisation, you know, I'm not going to lie, it's been tough for us, and it's hitting every corner of the whole economy, isn't it? But we're just desperate to try to help independent caterers to survive, because this is people's lives, this is people's livelihoods, this is their hopes and dreams and aspirations, and the more we can do, the more you can do by sharing this out to people, the more better chance people have got of being able to get through this with a business that's still credible and viable. But I like to think of myself as an optimist, and the future, you know, without doubt, when this ends, I'm very confident that hospitality will boom back, without doubt. Thanks for your time, Andrew. You've been amazing again.
Pleasure. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, and
Thank you.
If anybody's got any questions, as I say, just fire them in, and we'll do what we can to help.
Great.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Cheers.